Now on PG Podcast Network, it's time for the year-round Carnival with Vince Accardi and your host, Racetrack Ralphy.
G'day, thanks so much for getting our preview of Goodwood Day and all the other stakes races in Morphettville tomorrow. Weather looks absolutely perfect. The rail's out 6 metres, and Vince Accardi from Daily Sexuals is going to break it down with us. Good morning, Vince.
Hey, good morning, Ralphy. Another great day in paradise.
Absolutely right. Now, Morphettville, when the rail goes out 6 metres, it does give those on paces a little bit more advantage, does it?
Absolutely, because well, typically what's going to happen is they're 3-4 off the fence, turning for home. They're in the lanes, Ralphie. Maybe if you stay hard on the fence, that's not going to work for you. But typically they do roll 3-4 off the fence or wider, Ralphie. So I expect those lanes and that middle part of the track to be like on fire.
All right. Well, what we'll do, we'll start with the Goodwood, and Vince, I just wish racing was this easy. And that is, we know that if Giga Kick turns up as Giga Kick, he will win. But racing isn't that easy, is it?
No. Well, it might be a bit like life. You have good days and not so good days. But yes, if Giga Tick turned up and delivered what it's capable of doing, it would be a foregone conclusion. The $2.20 would look amazing, but I don't know if the horse is in that form. But the good thing is, it's interesting that Zara's been booked.
Yep.
To be on the horse, I feel that that's a big plus. And the other key element was, if you just focusing on the trials, the big indicator for me there was it's already at a benchmark level, which means the requirement on how much more you got to improve isn't going to be significant. The horse has got to want to do it, obviously, on race day. That's it, really.
So let's pull it apart a bit, because I'm looking at the IVR table here, and he's got the four best performances in the race: 4.5, 4.4, 3, 3. So, and if you're looking at the early edition of Race Speed Profiles, 2.6 lengths above benchmarks, the forecast. So he flies past that. But so he's a horse who's clearly had some issues since he won the Everest as a 3-year-old. 364 days at one stage he missed, and then first up he wasn't clearly wound up last September because he was targeted at the Everest, which he just missed too. So you've got that. You've mentioned the trials that were good. How do you look at a first up profile for a horse like this who it could be a tiny bit misleading, because clearly at Moonee Valley, when he wasn't right and he had to miss that all that time afterwards, and he was in the wrong part of the track anyway, the last two preps he hasn't been wound up first up, whereas I think tomorrow he's coming to play.
Yeah, well, this is the big indicator, Ralphie. Just the whole setup does sort of give you that view. This is what we're going to see happening. And of course, from a first up perspective, if you were just purely looking at it from that lens before you took any sort of BT intel into it, the reality is the horse has already sort of franked itself around that sort of 1.5 to 2 range. And yes, it is over 1,000 metres, but the reality is that puts you already in that strike zone that you need to be competitive. The question, of course, like always, is the horse ready for that? And I feel that's the number one criteria, Ralphie. We've got a different setup. It is 1,200 metres first up versus typically 1,000 metres. So how do we deal with that? And what concessions are you going to make to trial? What I want to indicate is that this is a runner that, from my perspective, looks set to at least on a bad day run benchmark. Now, if it parades well, Ralphie, then it's not a big ask to try and find a couple of lengths to put you in the race. You're probably going to find 2.5, 3. I feel that the bookmakers or the corporate odds haven't, I feel they're looking at past history and going on maybe a wish, and that's the price. It should be a little bit more generous than that, because it is sort of franking it to say, okay, well, we have an expectation you're going to turn up and run big and be too good. And the reality is it probably has to run not to its PB, but it has to run like every bit as good as last campaign to be good enough to be first 3, and probably slightly better to win.
So race shape is important always. Well, I suppose if it's Winks or it's Black Caviar, it isn't, because they just smash them anyway. But this is why I also wanted to ask you about, with the rail being out that bit further and it's easier for the leaders to get to the lanes. He's drawn wide, and typically he's a horse who likes to relax early and then finish on. This track won't play the same as 2 weeks earlier when Mark Zara put on a masterclass all down the middle of the track, and those on the inside were just in no man's land. So in this case, if he and I know, Mark's so good at working it out, but the get back and blend out wide run may not be ideal because the leaders could get away a bit.
Well, they could, Ralphy. It's a possibility, but the reality is there's still going to be that sort of overall structure in the race. It's not. I don't feel we're going to be in a situation where the leaders are got a big break and a horse like Giga Kick's going to be 10 off him. Well, if he is 10 off him, then he's not going to get there, Ralphy, right? The reality is I just feel Mark Zari's pretty tuned in, Ralphy. Like, he knows exactly where to position the horse, and his job really is, I've got to make sure I'm inside 8 lengths. I've got to make sure through the first 400 metres they don't get away from me.
Yeah, and I suppose a field of 13 rather than the capacity, that they also can buy you an extra length or two. So
absolutely,
you've got speed car forecasters above average now. The other that also means that you haven't got it as fast. So that says that perhaps they won't completely string out.
No, I don't feel they will, Ralphie. I really don't. I mean, everything sort of points out to like Quick for this race is going to be +4.
Yeah,
and realistically, it's probably more like a +2 setup, because when you look at who the likely lead pack are, if someone wants to go ridiculous and try and, I don't know, I'm just going to call it prodigy of the modern age in a sprint race, they're going to create kamikaze for themselves. They'll be putting the flag up at the turn, which isn't going to help you win a Goodwood. But realistically, I don't feel that's going to take place. Everything sort of points to not orderly, good pressure, 2 lengths, 4 lengths maximum above benchmark. And that means Giga Kick and a couple of others like Charmstone as well, and even Generosity, they're going to have to be no more than 8 lengths off them at the 800. That's your worst position based on that race shape. If you are further back, then it's going to be hard. Doesn't matter how powerful your last 400 is, it's going to be very difficult.
Let's go in market order, and that means that Reserve Bank is second favourite. Now, he's obviously going very well, the 3-year-old taking on the older horses, but gee, if you look at this IVR table here, the best is current prep. He's trending at benchmark range at the moment.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting that they got this set up. I mean, we could take a position and say, what's the range, like extension look like? What's the maximum maybe this horse could go to? At the moment, it's trending benchmark 0.3 above. I couldn't find any fault in the performance of the last 2 starts that give me insights that this horse had a disruption in its energy distribution. Therefore, the benchmark performance is worthy of a lot more. At no stage in any of its races has it shown an explosive sprint, which we could also utilise, Ralphie, to our advantage. Say, okay, well, the horse has got a monster sprint. Who knows, right? There's none of that. And then for this particular stable, the preparation does look slightly different to what they normally do in terms of prepping their horses up. And it feels like when you look at the intel that the horse came to its top after 2 runs. And we had that 1,100 metres back to 1,200 metres, and we've seen this peaking performance. But the new peak tomorrow is like a long way away from where this horse is at. But like Wallace once said, you don't know where a horse is going to go that's lightly raced until they're tested. And only then you can, and only then you can sort of say, okay, well, you didn't make that next transition. So I'm a bit hesitant to say the horse can't do it. But on the numbers, if you look at that very last run, what I didn't like was the negative taper over the last 200 metres.
So the horse that can't be denied is the Sangster form from 2 weeks ago. Now Charmstone was $11.01 with a real lovely performance there, 2.5 lengths above benchmark, or 2.4 to be accurate, from Amina. We know Amina. This is the Freeman stable are just so switched on in big races, and maybe it's got more to come, because I did notice that Amina had to go inside the lanes, whereas Charmstone was just so perfectly ridden by Mark Zara.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic. I know we got a switch here in riders, but the reality is Charmstone was super impressive first up. 2.4 above. I mean, just that run alone sort of qualifies you for this. And I've got to say it's like a new level. Well, from a first up perspective, it is. It's definitely a new level. I also look at the way the horse fell apart over the last 200 metres, Ralphy. It won the race, right?
Yep.
But the de-acceleration was 2.7 lengths. It's impossible to sit there and say there's no way the horse can't improve more. The challenge here is, can you do it second up, or are you going to need it third up? That's the challenge. I don't feel it's any other challenge other than that. Is, are you going to be able to repeat second up and climb again, or is it going to be a sideway run and then you're going to climb? Because sometimes horses, when they produce that big run first up, Ralphie, we've seen it plenty of times, they have a tendency to go sideways flat, especially if it's all within sort of 7-14 days, where there's been a pressure race. Like that run at Morphettville, that was pressure. 3.6 below first section, huge middle, 7.5 above, still produced a 2.9 overall last 400. Like, there was an effort asked, and the horse delivered.
And Amina that ran second, I mean, this horse, she showed good talent as a spring filly, and it looks like she's gone on with it.
Again, yeah, a very, very difficult horse to fault. Slightly, well, overall 1.9. I mean, you can't sit there, I can't sit there and say, oh, hold on, you're miles inferior to Charmstone. No, I mean, you're a very lightly raced horse. And in fact, in some cases, you probably got some edges. Your drop-off was also clearly visible over the last 200 metres, giving indication that improvement's still to come. But we also got to note, this also was an improved performance first up, prep to prep, and they know they've got a better horse this time round. But is it going to turn up second up and deliver, or are we going to get a sideway run? Now, I know they're targeting, but sometimes targets can be foiled by that leading run, because you don't get the race shape where you can just sort of gently blend in and just have an explosive last 400, where in this case you've been asked to work pretty much from the jump all the way to the finish line, and that takes a little bit out of you. But I have to give respect to this horse for sure.
So I don't want to move on from that Sangster run before mentioning Stretton Angel. It was $6.50 for a reason. Tommy Stockdale just got it wrong. He was middle pack, missed the start a bit, and then went inside, well inside the best part of the track. So it was on clearly the worst part of the track. Barrier 1 might not necessarily be a negative tomorrow, with the rail out much further than a fortnight back. And Lockie Neindorf, with a good South Australian jockey who's got his tail up after winning the South Australian Derbies on next week. If she brings her best, she was just beaten narrowly in this race last year with a very solid 2.2 lengths above benchmark. She won't be far off.
Well, this is probably what I was hoping to see last start, that we would see this trend to that, because that run second up was sort of giving the indication, Ralphie, that we could end up in that sort of situation when it was a Flemington back in March over 1,200 metres, broke benchmark, 0.2 above them. That was probably my first glimpse of light to give this runner some respect, that we could be heading in the right direction. The last two runs, though, they ultimately, they haven't really been there, Ralphie. Now, I know we've got the 35 days, and that's probably the strategy around maybe you're going to get that rebound. But last start, it was a question mark for me. I didn't see enough. But we can have a negative bounce off 35 days and then peak. So you take it on trust and say, all right, well, maybe you're going to peak, but where are you going to peak to? Are you going to peak to your outer limit of 2.2? Because really that's your maximum stretch goal now. Or are you going to run more like benchmark +1, they won't get you there, right?
Yep.
Benchmark +1's not going to get you there because we've just talked about a few other runners that are already well past that, and they have to have off days for this horse to be in front of it. I'm respecting it, Ralphie. The other little caveat is, what are you going to do with the treatment of the ground condition is in the S range? Like, why is that the case? And I haven't checked YR. I'm just assuming there's no rain.
No, there's no rain.
Obviously, okay. You just got to hope that trend continues into the G.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one I have left for last is the different form, and I'll tell you what. I don't know if I'll definitely play, but if someone gave me a voucher, I know who I'd definitely be playing with. I'd definitely be playing with Generosity. It comes from a real race in the Cocker. It looks like it's going to get a beautiful draw. It's unlike, let's say, Amina and Charm Stone. It's not like it's second up. It's got a base of racing. What's your expectations for it tomorrow?
I love the fact, of course, Ralphie. Why wouldn't you say, if I got a voucher?
That's right. Yeah, Well, I wouldn't have it on. I would, if I had a voucher, I wouldn't have it on Giga Kick. I'd have it each way on Generosity for sure.
Right.
That's my point.
That makes sense. Well, Simon Miller is pretty good when he takes them to Adelaide.
Yeah.
Funny enough, sometimes better than when he takes them elsewhere. Right, but for some reason, when he takes them to Adelaide, they seem to really, really deliver and perform. And the clarity for this horse is going to be all about that. If the horse travels right, parades well, and runs up to last starts 2.7, and why not? I mean, have a look who's in the race, right? Headwall's already the first line of fit. If Headwall was here, it would be top 2 in the market.
For sure.
Not even maybe. It would be absolutely testing for favouritism. I'm not saying it'll be in front of Giga Kick, but it would be pressing it. That's more than enough to, and this is without even considering overpass, right? Where that would start in this race as well would be another clear indicator. But I'm only pointing that out. It's just really putting that baseline in. The race matrix is saying that that performance should be respected and not less than 2.2. So it's coming into this race with the required credentials. You then look at the breakdown of that last run. It was sensational. It's rock hard fit. The only thing that stands in its way is it still going to be a happy horse when it steps onto the Morphettville ground? That's it. And if it is, look out. Your voucher is going to come to Ralphy. You better go and get that voucher, Ralphie.
Yeah, they just don't hand them out. It's $11.
Yeah, it's excellent price. Excellent.
Yeah. Are you? And of course, we're not doing an update podcast tomorrow, but at this stage, are you likely to play or likely to stay out with a race where Giga Kick's the dominant favourite?
Well, here's the thing for me.
Yep.
I'm right now eyeing up the voucher horse and Giga Kick.
Generosity or Giga Kick.
Yep. And the reason why is has to be a little question mark about second up Charms Stone. We've got to put faith that Stretton's going to take the next step. Amina's also slightly in that same boat, second up, right?
Yep.
Reserve Bank, can you climb? Maybe this is the big leap. It just go bang and explode. And say, okay, well, here you are, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. And then, I don't know, Ralphie, I'd be really disappointed if any of the other horses won, because not saying that they're bad, but they haven't been able to deliver near where we need to be. So that's why right now it's Giga Kick. Are you parading superbly? You're turning up. Do you want to be there? The price is like right on the borderline. It's a yes, no, right?
Yep.
Unfortunately, it can't be an A grade bet. And Generosity, if it parades really well, and I'm sure they're going to talk to Simon Miller and we get some positive communication about how he feels the horse has settled in and if it's done any piece of work, then maybe that's the way to play, Ralph, because there's not much between them based on where we're currently at. There is if we look in the pure history, but if we're looking at where we are right now, Giga Kick brings its best from last campaign only, first up, and Generosity runs to last start. There's less than a half length between them.
which is big for $11 versus $2.10. So that's the point, I guess. That's what we're underlining. All right, let's go through the other stakes races here, starting with race 3. It's low confidence. There's no IVR forecast, really. When I say no, minus 4.9. So Steel Trap is a very short price favourite. I think the other two are pretty good horses in the making, Brave Design and Salty Pearl. So just from a pure numbers perspective, what's been shown so far?
Oh, well...
Not much.
Who's the actual... who's the favourite? Steel Trap.
Yeah, so Steel Trap comes through, a fortnight earlier. That the winner looked pretty good and rated okay too in Legacy Bound. It's 2 from 2, and there was a big gap to the rest. But like I said, I'll get your thoughts, because I think Brave Design, we haven't seen the best of it yet, and Salty Pearl, its Bendigo run told me, well, I think Mars got one that they've got a bit of an opinion on, because that looked the platform run for me.
Yeah, I feel the interesting is what Clarkin's done with this Steel Trap.
Yep.
Gave it the 2 runs, 63-day break. And I'm seeing so much evidence of this in the platform, Ralphy, when I just run my simulations, the evidence of what happens when you have roughly this type of sort of timeout, like 63 days.
Yep.
Some jurisdictions spell, others it's a let up. They do one or two things. They either run superbly or flat, and then they peak. So there's a big chance that this horse has definitely had a run below, even though it ran second, and that's a bit deceptive, right? The numbers indicate that the horse ran a couple of lengths below its profile. And then you look at the last 200 metres of that run, and there's a distinct clarity of drop-off. That's a little bit of conditioning. So it appears that the Clarkin team are pinning this race, and they've got Jamie on board. And I have an expectation the horse is going to run at least -3. Now, if you run -3, Ralphie, and you need -5 to get on a podium, this horse will run first or second.
There's that.
It's not even maybe.
Yeah.
And if it's not smashed in terms of pace early, which you know that Jamie Carr's not like that, right?
No.
She's not going to pull the ripcord. So I respect that. When I move away from that and say, okay, Ralphie, what do you want me to make up? 4.5 lengths below benchmark, 6 lengths below benchmark. Then you sit and look at that actual profile. So I had a look at that Brave Design, and there it is, 2 race starts in its life. Coming in, this is O'Brien, 63. Are we going to come in and go bang with the peak? If we are, then you don't know what can happen, Ralph. This horse can improve 2-3 lengths.
Yeah.
Now, right now, I can't see that, but I feel the first race start the horse has, like, I'm just putting that sideways. That was like half a run.
Yep.
And then it had the run at Flemington all the way up to 1,400 metres. It was a little bit of a taper at the end, but I feel that the O'Brien team has done everything spot on about this is the right race, 1,200 metres, the 63 days. And if it's sharp, and the O'Brien camp is quite capable of coming off for 63 days and going bang, and they've targeted the right race. So how can you not respect? That's the reason why I ended up saying, no, I feel that you need to be on top, and, it could turn out to be you versus Steel Trap.
And what did we make of the mid-race move and chase of Salty Pearl first up?
Yep. Well, this particular runner here, it's one of these things. These 1,100-metre races, right?
Yeah.
They're challenging. What got flushed out was this. They've obviously got an engine, because the mid-race move, like you said, plus 8.1, very, very high octane. There was that little bit of issue between the 4 and the 2. So there's a lot to sort of suggest here that this 4.3 is a bit masked. But I looked at the race matrix, and the race matrix got a bit softer. So when I allowed for roughly 2 to 3 lengths of adding back, that still just brought me back to the IVR figure. And I just hope it's not a specialist 1,100-metre horse. That's all.
Yeah, we'll learn more tomorrow. Okay, let's move on from that and go to the Centuria. It's a fascinating little race. There's 8 runners there. The market doesn't like one of them, and well, I suppose hoops are $16. But there's a bit of a case for all for the next 6. So let's pull it apart. How are you seeing the pace of this unfolding in race 4?
Well, a lot of them like to be in a forward position, in a tiny field. That could create, well, generally does create a little bit of artificial pressure. It is 2,000 metres. And if they settle down after a few hundred metres, then we could have a complete jackknife and go extremely slow and horses pulling. Because usually when you have this sort of cluster, small field, the mentality of the riders are, we should be conserving, going slow. So that means usually when that happens, you could see a lot of pulling take place. And if you see that in the run, then you know they're probably going -10. If they're allowed to run to their normal blend, then I'm sort of predicting about a -4 to a -1 below benchmark, which, you know, is close enough to average for where we need to be for this sort of race. And that would be good if that happens. That also means, Ralphy, that everyone's going to get their chance, and it's going to come back down to who's got the best sprint. Jordan Child's pretty good from a forward position rider. If he can get the horse to do what is needed to be done, and that's relax, then I look at it and say, okay, what sort of clothes do you have? Well, if you look at that Sandown run, Ralphie, wow, what a big sprint this horse has potentially got. And then I sort of back that up when I looked at the first 2 race starts last campaign at Sale and Geelong. This horse has got a big sprint, Ralphie. And now that it's tasted this sort of, you know, above 2,000 metre range, although I gave a lot of respect to the 1,800 metre run, just sometimes, you know, Sandown, you can get some artificial extras in terms of speed, just the way that track has been, you know, had plenty of speed in it, Ralphie. But realistically, this horse is turning up with potentially the biggest kick in the field.
Well, you don't want to be taking on this table at the moment. I've just had a look. Last 2 months, 55% of horses under $3. So when they got the right horse, they win. So
yep, absolutely.
They're very, very good. It ran second to its stablemate nonconformist that we'll get to shortly. So is she an opportunity horse, Vince? She's pretty tight price.
What price is it?
Low 2s. You don't like the bookmakers, do you?
Low 2s, yeah. Well, that's you know, like, put it this way. I wouldn't try and beat down the door to see if they're going to give me $1.30, because I'd say that's like really at the extreme edge. Because what I want to be franking here is that if we have a no pace race, it's probably a bargain price if we're going to have that. And I'm just sort of sitting there saying, what would you take? Giga kick or this one? I don't know. That's how I'm looking at it.
I would take this one. Yeah. Okay, there's that race, and there's a race with a little bit of confidence there. We'll see how things unfold tomorrow. The longer race here, this is a favourite I'm not sure I'd want to be on, but let's pull it apart. It's a Fillies Classic here, over 2,500 metres. Cavity Bay is the tight favourite on the relatively quick back.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on Cavity Bay?
Well, rock hard fit, that's for sure. Last start, I actually thought it was interesting. They took it all the way out to the 2,500 metres, stayed superbly. And really, when you think about it, Ralphie, look what they did. The start before, they were at Morphettville 2000. They found themselves in a race where they're travelling 9 lengths above benchmark and the early speed's +13.
Yeah,
like
brutal.
It's brutal,
yeah.
Right? They turn around, yep, the horse has run 5th, but it's run 9 lengths or 12 lengths slow overall, 2 seconds, which is beautiful. But look what it did when it really warmed up over the last 800 metres. That probably franked what they were thinking. +3.5 between the 8 and the 4, +4.2 last 400. And I consider the 3 lengths below benchmark transition with that last 800 to be like excellent, because you're not doing it off 10 lengths below benchmark first section, Ralphie. You're doing it off 3 lengths below, and there was good pace. +3.3 was the lead speed. They were in almost the golden spot. This looks like a golden Jamie Mellum ride with the McAvoys. Has to be the horse to beat clearly here, Ralphie.
So that's That's the numbers. We're almost got a similar conversation to Giga Kick. That's the numbers and the setup. The question is about the animal itself. A filly having its third run in 2 weeks, and a couple of them been hard. Is there a query to you?
No, there isn't, because if you look at the setup, like what the horse did third up, showed good speed, 0.4 above first section, 1.9, then went into a brutal race. Any flatness got removed last start. And the race was kind to it because the horse settled. And you see the way the horse, see what happens. If they were in a race where they were going plus 10 again, I would then be having the reverse opinion. I'd be saying, no, don't want to go there, because big chance of a lot of problem. If there's pressure, that's even worse. But now it won't matter. Pressure, no pressure. The horse is completely hardened. And I'm not a big fan of 7-day backups, but I am with this horse.
Okay, well, it's nice and simple there. Cavity Bay, Hurricane, Georgie, Litzdale are the others, but it sounds like if you're playing, you're not interested in anything else.
No, it's just going to come back down to, is there more bravery with with the bookmakers?
Well, at least you get high twos there instead of the low twos.
Yep.
So there's that. Interesting little mile here as well, and this one, if you can find the winner, you'll get a good price because it's quite open here. There's 3. Really, or 4, I should say, actually, between $4.50 and $6. Nice competitive race here. A few of them have come through this mile a fortnight back, and then you got Sheelight chasing Pride of Jenny, and the real different form in the genuine class in non-conformist. What's your thoughts on in this 6 race?
Yeah, surely non-conformist has got to be the starting point. Surely, Ralphy.
What'd you make of that trial?
I thought the trial was like on point.
Yeah.
For first, a clear signal that we're going to run at least benchmark. Very clear signal. When I see that signal that we're going to roll in around benchmark, it wasn't a winning trial, of course, right? But the reality is, if you can be half length below, 1 length below, trending somewhere thereabouts, then I know you're going to run benchmark +1. And then I looked at its first up profile last prep, off a much longer break and a different setup. It turned up around 1.2.
Chasing Buckaroo.
They know.
Buckaroo's that nice and short here.
Yeah, and Buckaroo was like on fire.
Yeah.
That prep. So I'm just sitting back here saying, I don't know what other plans they might have, but the reality is this is perfect targeting first up. Because if you run poorly here, you might be in for trouble, but nothing is showing that in any of the performance leading into this first up run.
Well, look, he's an 8-year-old, so I reckon they would just say, we can't waste a run. So he's coming to play. Let's see what he can do. But if the horse is fit and well, I don't think they've got any reasons for thinking anywhere else. They'll probably go to Queensland if he runs well and wins, but I think they just can't waste a run for a horse at this age, rising 9-year-old.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, totally.
Sheelight, what's the chances of it being flat from last week, chasing Pride of Jenny? And when I say chase, it wasn't like it was on her heels, but it was still a fast race.
Well, it was a very fast race for this horse. It was taking itself to a new level in terms of early speed. It absolutely obliterated any of its previous runs. And mind you, the Bendigo run was quick.
Yeah.
Plus 1.8. Then it's had to come into another, extremely tough. Now, see, I don't like the 7-day backup off this setup.
With travel.
So that's my problem. You had a fast run, 2 starts back. Yep. And then you've turned up, gone to Caulfield and gone even faster, like much faster. How does that help you off 7 days? Now, I know you can run a whole lot of analytics and it could potentially show you that they're, great betting opportunities, and maybe they've worked out the way to handle this and they're going to get that. But what the analytics tool doesn't show you is what happens when you key in when they're coming off fast run races. What happens? Usually the quick backups are gold when there isn't any pressure.
100%.
And look at the drop-off, Ralphy, right? That drop-off last 400 metres wasn't to do about conditioning. That was like, I'm gone, I'm done. Like, I'm absolutely done. I mean, 4.9 below benchmark last 400 was a 7-length drop-off from the 400 to the finish line. That's horrendous, Ralphie.
So
not liking it at all.
Yeah, it could run flat, and then I wish I was separating these horses actually, because I did this meeting 2 weeks ago, and I really liked that mile. Regal Asmon was there to win, and it did, but it was rock hard fit, and I thought these other horses that ran second, third, and fourth, Aaron Bay, Chicago Storm, Air Assault, they're all going to peak next start from here, so they get their chance to peak. But the reality is, Nonconformist has still got a class edge on those 3 horses.
Yeah, and this is like in the end, like the horse we just spoke about. I've given you my views, but if I look at the scoreboard, you would say, okay, well, it's a 0.2 to half above. You can't completely throw it in the bin, because what happens if you get the reversal and it's a very slowly run race, right?
Yeah.
And what's the competition look like? And what happens if Nonconformist is not ready, and all these things? But what about Air Assault, Ralphie? What was your thoughts on that?
Odds. I think it's fantastic odds. $15. It's going to roll forward and give a sight.
Yeah, I feel this is one of the forgotten horses. Like it's trending in profile is like it's a beautiful structure. First up 3.3 below, second up sideway run -7.2. Last start Morphettville, bang, right back on track, 2 lengths below. Good tempo through the first half of the race. We've got the downside over the last 200 metres of about 2.5, 3 lengths. Indicator, peaking. So the peaking is when I put up the graph, I said, okay, what are the chances of you getting up to that +1? Well, the graph sort of indicated that you're probably high probability of around 0.1, 0.5 range, and high probability is like 90%. Wow. And only about a 50% probability hitting +1. So I said, okay, well, you're ready to run above benchmark. How? And that's why I said, there's no way I'm removing you out of the top group. And the other one, which I don't understand this, right? Maybe this is the runner that bothered me. This Run Boss.
Okay.
Just it bothered me in the sense that I feel that there's potential here with this horse. I just can't work out what on earth is this trainer doing, right, with this horse, because this horse has got huge potential, and it's been very evident in some of her performance. You look at that run on the Parks track on the 1st of March. That was massive, Ralphie. Absolutely massive run. 1.7 above. The first 2/3 of that race was brutal, and it performed superbly. And then we've seen the reversal. They gave it like 28 days off. And I just sat back and looked at the way the horse closed and said, wow, you're pretty impressive. 7.8 last 800 metres. And then to me, it looked deliberate last start, going back to the 1400 for a tune-up here. As probably, I'm just making this up, the part about it looks like it could be its final kill for the campaign, because I can't work out the stable. But what I am concerned about is big chance this horse is going to come to town tomorrow and easily break benchmark. And if you break benchmark, you're in the fight.
Right, well, he's $13 as well. So there's a couple that are terrific each way odds there, Air Assault and Rubamos. But what we're saying is on the historics, if Nonconformist, and he seems fitting well, he's got the class edge at this stage.
Ralphie, everything looks good. Let's hope we've seen it before. Some of these 7-8-year-olds, they come out and they start the campaign airborne. That's what we need to see, airborne campaign.
Beautiful. And let's finish with the 7th race in the program, the Proud Miss. It's for the fillies and mares, and it's a good little sprint here over 1,200 metres.
Yeah, it is a good sprint, Ralphie, and I feel the pressure of the race is going to be decent. Really struggle to see this race be below benchmark, and I reckon it's going to be game on, possibly +2, +4, which is solid. And that really does allow the horses that are in that 2-3 lengths off lead pace to be a massive chance. And if you can be good enough to be inside 6, turning for home, then you're a big chance to get victory, because I feel it's going to help those sort of horses. The big challenge is, for me, is what do I do with the Moody horse that Jamie's on? Because that Mornington run was excellent, Ralphie. Best of the day, clear cut. I'm still trying to work out how do you run +8 last 400. off that sort of setup. Now, I know there's speed in the track and all those things, and I thought, how fluky is that? But I wiped my mind of that, because you don't have to go back to Chura. Okay, it was a maiden, but it was 8.5 last 400 off a super slow race. Then it went to Mornington and repeated with a 9.3 off much slower pace. I feel this horse has come back huge this time.
Well, it should be underlined that first up run, it was $60. There wasn't much market expectation, but barrier 17 that day, that was that quirky day where you had to be on the inside 3 lanes, basically, of that straight race. There was that savage crosswind. Any horse in the middle of the track was in no man's land that day.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting back here saying they know that this horse has come back much, much better. Well, I reckon they already knew this horse was good.
Yeah. So
how do you go? Yeah, sorry. How do you go, Ralphy, to a race, break benchmark through the first 2 split times, and still manage to pull off a plus 8.1?
Well, you do that when you're airborne.
Yeah, and you got talent.
Absolutely. So the 2 favourites, I'll get a quick word off that. My concern with the 2 favourites, New York Luster and Cleo Cat, is Mooney Valley form. I can't trust it. I can't trust the 3-horse field at Warrnambool. So what can you tell us apart from those 2 runs?
Yeah, well, it's Yusuf Gaddy's absolute best with his strategies. And what I mean by that is he's had this horse, New York Luster, like, doing amazing, right? Like, I mean, seriously, Ralph. Last 6 runs has won.
Yep, fantastic.
Been, no further back than 7 from the last 7. So I'm saying, wow, this horse has got talent. Now, that one thing that might have saved it from last start, because I feel that Usyk sometimes races him way too much and has really crazy ideas about how to set horses up, but what he does know when they've got ability. He's very good at that, and he obviously knows this one's got ability. And if you look at what happened at the Valley, have a look at that setup. And this is ground condition has been one of the big problems there. 1.2 below benchmark. That's solid with a 6-length slowdown between the 8 and the 4. Last 400, huge finish. 14 days later, that was off 84 day. Now, on the surface, I look at the figure and say 0.7, that's close to a peaking run. But the reality is I actually feel that it wasn't a peaking run. I feel that run was smothered and the peak could come tomorrow. Big chance for a peak. And this is the other horse, when you look at the capacity of what this horse can do over the last 400 metres, can absolutely test the Moody team, with Bridal Waltz. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is where the fight is between them 2.
I'll throw in Sculiardo as well and get your thoughts there, because really up the straight, I think it just floated. Mooney Valley track that day was diabolical. Well, then it's had 7 weeks off, nice sharp trial leading in. I look at that Bendigo run and I thought, you're a horse with genuine talent. It reminded me a bit of that Skybird of Mitch Freeman's, the way it won that 1100 that day. Now, as you say, 1100 sometimes a quirky distance, but if a horse is going to bounce, this is an opportunity to bounce.
Well, no question, the Lee Shannon Hope team, they've also got a good horse. They've been training for a long time, Ralphie, and the bubble did burst last start though, right? And I know here we are 49 days, but I'm still deeming this all one prep. I feel the signal is there. Now, you could take a step back and say, well, ground conditions, a number of other things that you have to factor in. But you're still a run-to-run proposition all the way through. And I'm just sitting here saying, well, I don't know how that's going to work for you. I just don't know how that's going to work for you. I just sit back and say they might be a good horse next campaign, a better horse than what we've already seen.
So it's a talent horse, but it's not a set-up horse.
Yeah, it's just wrong setup. You know this, Ralphie. When you're on your first prep, how many runs before the bubble bursts?
Yep.
That's all.
So they're trying to reheat the soup.
Yeah, and I don't blame them, because a stable like this is not easy to get a good one, and they got one that's got ability.
Absolutely. All right, that's South Australia for tomorrow. I think there's a couple of nice little opportunities there. Hopefully we're high-fiving after the meeting. We'll wrap it all up on Tuesday for our review section, but in the meantime, thanks so much for being a customer of Year Round Carnival.